All right, so we are live once again. GEO Live number 20. We are a little bit late. We didn't get to do this last month. We had some technical difficulties that prevented it, but all things work for the best, and we are here this month with Chris Preciado, as always, and joined by a special guest tonight, Jeffrey Brite, who, well, I will let Jeffrey introduce himself. So go for it, Jeffrey.
My name is Jeffrey Brite. I live in New Orleans, or the New Orleans greater area, and I helped start a worker co-op, first tech support worker co-op in the United States. At least that's what I'm told. And we did about 20-something years ago. And most recently, we merged with another tech support co-op, or with our industry would refer to as an MSP, our managed service provider co-op, in the Boston area called Tech Collective, and we just recently merged with them. So that's the most exciting thing that's happening most recently with our co-op.
All right. So do you want to tell us a little bit more about this merger with Tech Collective? We interviewed Yohai last month, and he kind of gave us, from his side of coming from Boston Tech Collective. So what was it like with C4? How'd you?
Well, so the idea, so I met Yohai before he started the Tech Collective. I was at I was on the board for the U.S. Federation of Worker Co-ops, and we were at a retreat, and he tracked me down because he knew I was already doing work that he had done, and we had started kind of collaborating from back then. And for years, we've been me and him have kind of maintained a friendship to where we been sharing like what are you using for your contracts? How are you setting up? We both had a shop at a repair shop, and we like, if they figured out a method that was working for them in the marketplace, we would pick it up, and vice versa. Eventually, we started to create we thought that there would be a good opportunity for economy of scales. Both of us sell servers and laptops and computers, like we resell them like Dell or whatever, Lenovo, to our customers. And we thought there would be a good opportunity if we would join together to get like an economy of scale, like we can buy in bulk and split between us and get and that would be a good business practice. So we kind of worked with that. We created kind of an umbrella organization for that. So that's kind of where the first kind of where it started at. And then we started to do what's called what we refer to as a tech exchange, where you would send a tech to work for a week at one of their other shops, and we'd rotate people just to make sure we kind of stayed in contact with each other, stayed in each other's orbit, as well as like learn from each other as much as possible. Because we're worker co-ops, we didn't perceive each other as competitors, and just like so we can learn from each other that way. And then me and Yochai and Anna Boyer, who's our she's a bookkeeper but she's actually has a CPA. She's really good finance person, and we started to enter into conversations about what would just in a post, like in a world where with tech support nowadays, a good like 80-90% of it's done remote. You don't need to be on site. Before, you'd have to drive there, but now almost everything is done remote. We can do incredible things far away, maintaining machines, and not ever have to see it. We primarily go on site nowadays when there's a networking issue, or to deploy a new computer or something like that, or a server that has to have someone there. But once it gets set up, the tech doesn't need to be there anymore. We can do almost everything else remotely. So at that point, it was like questionable, like, well, why are we working in our own spheres when we could just get the economy of scales on the labor side, where like they have a ticketing system, we have a ticketing system, and then they have a help desk personnel, we have help desk personnel. Well, in any of our cities, we might have a boom or bust. like in terms of like a flood or a flood. So if we combine it, then we can, the boom flows over to their side if we were having it or if they're having it. So we kind of just started trying to work out how that was. It was a lot more. I thought it was going to be very, very complicated to do this process, and it was much more complicated than I expected. I just expected we would just, join forces, but there was like within that, there's like a whole bunch of assumptions that are kind of made. Like we literally operated, even though we're both worker co-ops, we operated differently with different kind of assumptions and different level of member engagement. Um, 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 and so you had to work out just like how were we going to make decisions now that we're a unified company. On our side, we also had a web development portion of the company, which they didn't have a thing that. So we're bringing this new kind of department to the co-op, and we had to figure out how that was going to work now that the since in I guess I don't know how much detail you want me to go into. C4's decision making process. Yeah, the C4's decision making process. We had kind of like a couple different levels of decision, like how decisions could be made. So obviously we have a GMM, and decisions can be made that way by any member, and we had a structure for that. But outside of that, we could also, and we did that like once a month, and we eventually got down to like once every other month. We didn't do GMMs because they're kind of big and they take up a lot of time. So
general member meeting, I'm assuming,
yes,
is
general
what
membership.
GMM
Yes,
stands for. Yeah.
Yes, correct. A general membership meeting. That's where all the members get to make the decision. And then what we did was we moved to the other way you can make decisions if something needs to happen a little faster is that we had our two departments. We had our MSP department, our tech support department, and we have our web side of the company. And if it was kind of like Congress, if it passes both houses, it became law. So that's another way we would do things. And so how are we going to move that portion of how decisions were made over to this new structure where the web department would be at the start of the process would be 3 people, and the tech department would be like 12 people. So it's like so now we're trying to figure out how do we do things differently based off of the new power structure and in the new dynamics. So there was lots and lots of things that went into that that took a lot longer than I expected it to take. But we got through it, and then there's of course the legal side of it, the financial side of it. They were I would as a business, they were earning much higher profits than we were. And there was a big question about why that was, since we're very similar. We almost use the same contracts. We have similar skilled personnel. I would say that that's actually still an ongoing debate about like why that had happened. And Boston's a higher market. It's one of the most expensive cities in the country, as I understand. And New Orleans is much smaller. We have about a little under 400,000 people that live in the greater New Orleans area, compared to Boston, which is like in the millions in the greater Boston area. So we think that may have something to do with it. There's like a lot of debates going on there, and everybody has their pet theories. So I won't cover those here, but but anyway, so yeah, there was so that's kind of how it evolved into it. And we're actually, I would say we're about we're we I think probably I guess we started the legal process a little over a year ago, and I would say the dust is just feeling like it's settling now, to where we're more coherent. There's not like the perception of like, well, this is the C4 part of the business, and this is the tech collective part of the business. It's all gotten meshed up really good now, and that's pretty gone. Occasionally you hear it crop up, but it's pretty gone at this point. So we're at the ending stages of it, and we actually just did a kind of a restructuring on our side as well, because the web department has gone down to just one person now, and so we restructured it because the departmental autonomy, that structure that we were using beforehand, doesn't kind of make sense when you only have one person in a department. So we're kind of more trying to integrate them. So when they get their tickets in, we want them to go through the standard ticketing system that normal tech support uses. Anyway, it's more, probably no one cares about that besides me. But it's more, trying to more integrate them in where we don't have to have 2 salespeople. We don't have to have 2 we can, it was like our help desk can handle first round of troubleshooting for a customer that's coming in, and then pass the ticket over to the senior web developer. So we're kind of working on that kind of stuff now.
Right. So how many members were in C4 and then approximately in Boston Tech Collective? Like, what were you approximately equal in membership when you joined, and how many
They had
members now?
well, I think we had a couple. I think they had a couple more, one or two more members than us when we first started. And by the time we merged, we Tech C4 had some of our members had left during the merger. So C4 side came in with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and Tech Collective had I think 7. So just a couple more.
Okay.
We're very close.
Right. And just out of curiosity, where did the new organization, what state is it incorporated in? What did you guys
We
decide to go
decided,
with?
yeah. So Massachusetts actually has a co-op statute, a worker co-op statute, that we could tap into. In New Orleans, we were actually legally an LLC. There's no worker co-op law here. So we thought it would be more appropriate to. That's what we basically sold the name and the corporation to Tech Collective, and Tech Collective is what we basically. As far as a merger goes, it was. Legally, it was. They just hired all of our people, and
Right.
and we had some standard agreement about like our people would maintain their seniority and that's just about patronage and certain dividends that we brought over money to go into dividend accounts over there. So I can't imagine everybody's interested in that part of it, but anyway,
Right.
so yeah.
But from
So
the legal side
basically,
of things, it's kind of like Tech Collective absorbed C4 is kind of how
correct.
the feds look at it or whatever. And
Yeah,
okay.
we thought their name was
Yeah.
better too. Like we were C4, which we were
Yeah.
incredibly geeky when we started, which was
What does
standard for
C4 mean?
Cyberspace Central Computer Consultants. And the thing is that when we started up, I was actually opposed to the name, and we had a bunch of our founders that were there, and they convinced me that it was going to be a good name.
Mhm.
And then those founders who convinced me after like the first year of us starting left the company, and now we were left with this name that I didn't really like, but we started getting business on it, and it's always like a conundrum when you're in a business. Do you lose your branding to come up with a better name? And then we had those conversations, but no one could come up with a name we could all agree on, so it stuck around. So
Right.
we did a DBA called C4 Tech and Design is what we decided to go with. So
Great.
but I think their
All
name's
right.
better.
Yeah. Great. So were there any major well, I guess we probably don't need to go into this too much because we did talk with Yohai
Sure.
a good bit about it. Yeah, it's just it is an interesting story. We don't hear, we hear a lot about new co-ops being born, and we hear a lot about co-op conversions, but you don't hear so much about co-op mergers.
Yeah, I was going to ask you if you knew any other ones that did it because it seems like such a natural thing to happen in the co-op world. If you're not competing, just join forces, But I also don't know if it happened before.
I mean, not like this, not where it was two already long time functioning worker co-ops that came together. Yeah, it's, the closest thing I could think of. I think when Arizmendi started, they were like approached by people when it was just the cheese board who wanted, some help setting up a co-op, but that wasn't a merger.
Yeah, they're
So
kind
yeah,
of almost a franchise model with Arizmendi.
yeah,
So,
and not just in the U.S. Like I can't think of anybody in Canada that I've heard of either doing this, but it does seem like for smaller co-ops, especially, if you can take advantage of, kind of the economies of scale, and I mean, it is easier for you guys working in the industry that you are, that you can do all this stuff online
right.
and whatnot. But yeah, it's there's some sort of similar things going on with like Brightly.
Hmm.
It is a housekeeping. It's an app actually, and it's owned by, I don't know, a nonprofit or a co-op developer, and then they have several different small like housekeeping co-ops that sell their services through it. So there's, but that's more of like a shared services cooperative, I would say, than an actual, like one big thing. So what you guys have done, at least to my knowledge, is fairly unique. So hopefully, maybe it sparks some ideas for other people. If it helps our co-ops become more stable, right?
Right. It seems natural, right? Like it seems like that should be, because we're cooperative. Why don't we just cooperate more closely? But there's also like different cultures that each one had, like so maybe it wouldn't work out in general. But it's really good.
Yeah.
Like people, when we were doing it, people were kind of excited to like work with other people. Like it expanded the amount of people that you could go to. It's very common in the IT world. I assume other things as well. But you just run into a problem, and you just never run into this problem before, and you can't solve the problem. So you pull in other people who are of similar skill to try to bear their brain on the troubleshoot the issue. And we were all excited about that prospect. If you get stumped, you just have more people now you can tap into. And so everybody was kind of excited about that portion of it, or most people were. Some people had to be convinced, but most people were excited.
Chris, did you have anything you wanted to ask about the merger?
Yeah, some of them I don't know when to ask them, but I was thinking about who could I see being part of a merger, co-op merger, and that the folks I come across, and who comes to mind is Chai Commons in Chicago. They're a tech worker, they're a hybrid co-op, and
okay.
And I think part of it is,
heard of them. That's interesting.
And part of the reason why I say that is because they're constantly searching for connections, honestly, all throughout the world, in the tech sphere. And I suspect part of it is like what you mentioned, how they just have to, part of it is in order to adapt, they gotta lean on others. But I was looking at the website techcollective.com, and let's see if I can share it. Share screen. Techcollective.com. It has a totally different vibe from other like tech websites that I go to. One is that it doesn't seem so like just a machine or just a search, because it actually like it shows like where your hubs are at. I'm not sure I've ever really seen that on a website that's offering tech services. That's pretty cool to see. Totally different feel.
That's David Stearns. He's originally with Tech Collective. He designed our website for that. I've been actually trying. So our web developer Drew, I've been trying to get him to like take over that, but he's currently underwater. So we're riding with this. But no, I like the website. It's actually very good.
Yeah. And I guess maybe the reason why I like it is because I hate this drive toward like we're being forced to use a lot of tech services, but then there's like terrible customer support, and then you can't really talk to somebody. Like a lot of times, like I just go in person. I'm like, I'm just gonna go in person. That's the easiest thing. I think maybe that's why something like that stands out to me. But also, maybe this can be for a later part of the interview. You let me know. But I noticed that on the website there's this free consultation link, and that was really cool to see. And I suspect that might be pretty important for a lot of co-ops, where it's honestly any business in general,
right?
Whether it's for profit, nonprofit, where in relation to like tech security, in the least. Because one thing that I've seen is like in so many parts of the world, we're being forced to use so much technology in order to maintain some type of a social network, whether it's a business or not. And honestly, it's kind of hard for a lot of people who are having to make this transition to all this, using all this tech stuff, to get an idea of like, well, do we need to like beef up our security? When do we need to do that? And
well, I'm really thrilled to hear you say that. Usually, we're trying to convince people to take security more seriously, and so when the client's interested in security, then it's all right. Well, it's a breeze, right? But oftentimes it's considered an inconvenience until there's a breach, and then that's when people become security conscious, or they read something in the news and they're like, "Are we protected from this?" So that's usually when it comes up. What's been happening more recently in the industry is it's interesting is that a lot of insurance companies are mandating certain securities and security procedures. So a lot of times that's another way that they'll approach us and like, hey, our insurance company's saying we need these things. I'm like, well, I'm glad we're paying attention to that now. So we can enforce like two-factor authentication and SSO and stuff like that. So so there's a transition happening in IT. I don't know if anybody's interested in this part of the, like, this is not co-op related, just IT in general. Is that what used to happen is everything was in an office. You may VP'd into your office. You might have had site-to-site connections between different offices that you have. But your primary, like the how you authenticate against your computer was an Active Directory sitting in your office. If you change your password, that changed it everywhere. If you needed files, you connected to the file server that was in the office, or if you were remote, you would call them road warriors. You would VPN and get access to it. And the VPNs were always sucking, and everybody hated them and wanted to throw rocks at us when we set them up. But now cloud services are the predominant thing, and with that, that obviously has some problems, right? If you have a file, so some of our clients are activist-based clients, right? And I want to protect them from, like, if you have your data on a file server, and let's say the government wants to come get those files. I don't know if y'all remember the days of Acorn. Acorn was in New Orleans, and when the government wanted their data, they had to come to your office and take the file server from you, right? And that's what that happened there. They called me to panic because the government commandeered their server. We had to get them a new server back up and running until eventually they went under because of all that stuff. But if you know you're going to be a target from a government, you at least want to know that they came and got the data, right? If the government goes to Google, you might not even know that they had access to your data. They're an NSA partner. They're going to just transfer it over. So there's certain things that try to protect customers from, but sometimes they don't take that seriously until they're in the situation. So those kind of things. So it depends on who your adversary is. Most people's adversaries are just random hackers, scammers, and stuff like that. But if you're an activist, you got to take a little more. You have to think about what's going to happen to you. If you're a union or if you're a immigrants' rights organization, you're playing a different game, or Acorn, which was just a community organization that got targeted. You just don't know what's gonna happen. So anyway, so now everything's going cloud. So now what we're trying to do is so what most people are doing is they have a Google login, and they have their Dropbox login, then they have a Salesforce login, and they have a handful of like cloud services on their computer. So these days what we're trying to do is control that environment to make sure that that the client always has access to the data from their so if an employee leave or whatnot, they can still get access to their data. If they're all using Gmail addresses, you can't get access to the data once they leave if they don't cooperate, right? And so and then also we're trying to enforce security with two-factor authentication, and we can combine all this stuff with us. Anyway, I don't know how many people are interested in actual going into the weeds of tech details. This is a co-op. That's my two passions: co-ops and tech. You can easily get me on one or the other. So,
so yeah, why don't we bring it around now
Okay.
for the last half here?
Sure.
Back to some more co-op stuff, and the reason why we invited you on in the first place was because you were kind enough to answer our survey that we put out earlier this year. And I am just going to show it. So let's see. Zoom in here a little bit.
Yeah, if I could say, I really appreciate what GEO has been doing recently, and also historically, like when I was first learning about co-ops, I was a subscriber to GEO newsletter back in the day. I was told that was one of the few in New Orleans. So
when it was still print.
Yeah, it was still print, and I would get it, and I learned so much from GEO newsletter about co-ops when I was trying to think about starting my own co-op. But
yeah,
so
well,
I want to thank y'all for that.
That's great to hear. I'll definitely make sure pass that on to Jessica. She has fond memories or not so fond memories, I guess, of folding all those things up and putting the little address labels on back in the day. But yeah, we've, a lot of people have put a lot of effort into making this thing stick around for so long. So it's good that people appreciate it. So yeah, we this is the 20th anniversary this year of the U.S. Federation of Worker Co-ops. We were, as an organization, we were involved with the founding of that, and we thought it was a good time to look back on kind of the whole movement and the trajectory of it over the decades, and so we put together a couple of questions. We asked put it out to our newsletter list, and asked for people to respond, and you were one of the people who did, and we were especially interested in some of the feedback you had specifically on the Federation, and because, as you say here, and I'll just read this, I was on the first U.S. Federation of Worker Co-ops board, and my co-op was a member up until we merged with another co-op last year. They mainly benefit by creating a network to talk with other worker co-ops. I used to think they were good to send new people to USFWC conferences, but it seems to be less relevant more recently. This is the part that really, I guess, guys, the USFWC is not really a member-led organization anymore. Even the board doesn't seem to have much input on how the organization behaves. A good example of that is that the staff decided to take on building a contractor support organization without telling the board. The board told them to get out of that agreement as soon as possible, but instead kept to the project and is trying to make it seem like it's a worker co-op itself in some way. Represents a lot of money and effort going to start up something that has nothing to do with worker co-ops. So on this issue of the Federation not really being a member-led organization anymore, and this is something that's come up. You're not the first person to say that, and so I guess I'd just like to kind of maybe get you to expand on that a little bit, and if you want to talk about the specific,
there's a number of things that could be talked about as far as that goes, but but when I was on the board, you would go to meetings at the conference, and members could directly pass rules that the board would be able to do. Those sessions these days kind of get sidetracked, or sometimes don't even happen. So a member's ability to get something in front of other members is pretty limited. And in the last handful, it seems to. I guess it's probably not proper for me in a public setting to go into like speculation about what's happening there, but I think it's objectively true that it's not membership led. It's pretty much led by the executive director who follows their own vision about how things go. And some of that's good, and some of his vision is good, some of it's bad. But regardless, like the concern for me is that if more and more of your budget isn't coming from the members, then I mean, I don't know how you can justify what's going to happen. Like just as any, just as like you're going to focus on where the money's coming in at. That's what you need to do. I contemplated like trying to pass a rule that would be that to try to limit the ratio of budget outside of membership dues, to try to focus it back on membership dues. And I'm not 100% certain how much that would, if you could get it passed in the environment that we're in right now, and if it did get passed, how much of impact that would have. I think it would, I think it would take a lot to make that work. I understand the arguments for doing some of the things that happen, but in the specific example that I gave there, so just to focus on that, I forget the name of. Unfortunately, I forget the name of the organization that they've spawned up. Originally, Gilded. That's it.
Yeah.
And originally, it was supposed to be a thing to help independent contractors get access to, like, they could do billing, and they could get access to insurance for themselves and whatnot. It sounds like a great thing. It's just not a worker co-op. So it was originally passed to the sister organization, what is it, DAWI, and then they didn't want to deal with it, so they passed it to the U.S. Federation of Worker Co-ops without board approval. That is uncontested, without board approval. The board was shocked that it had happened, and requested that they get out of this obligation as fast as possible, because it represents a whole lot of money, and something that we're not, that the U.S. Federation of Worker Co-ops is, we're not an organization that's designed to create new organizations that aren't worker co-ops. Like, there's a whole bunch of I would say when they were doing surveys for what the members wanted from the U.S. Federation of Worker Co-ops, overwhelmingly it was support for worker co-ops, and to have so much energy go into something that's not worker co-ops, when so to me that was very shocking to see how that played out, and I know that that what was started happening as a result of the board's reaction is that they stopped getting reports about the board stopped getting reports about what was happening with Gilded, and they had to, like, inquiry about what was going on. When it's so the board's ability,
it's still around, because Gilded is still around. Chris just interviewed somebody at the last conference who was actually stoked about it, because he was going into bookkeeping as like an individual, and was like, oh, maybe this will help.
Yeah.
But he had just heard about it. But they're obviously still doing it, despite the board saying get out of it.
Right. Well, right. And the new board might be on board now, because the board changes every so often. So you're going to have new members. And I knew the board, as of a handful of years ago, was definitely a number of years wanted to get out of it, and they never got out of it. So they may be compliant now. The board is sort of a problem anyway. I was a member of the IWW, and was a member of the general executive board years ago, and that was kind of surprising to see how the IWW operated, and then see how the U.S. Federation of Worker Co-ops operated, where the IWW is very membership led. Anybody can make a motion on the floor of their GA that they have, and the board's pretty responsive to the members, which kind of I expected. And then you see it kind of like almost turn into what looks like a normal nonprofit, and that pretends to be a membership organization. And I don't have any vision on how to get back to that. It would take a major upheaval. Most of the people who jump on the board, they're not getting paid to do that. It's they're volunteer to do it. It's required to do a bunch of work that you have to do on top of your job. Maybe your job supports you in that, maybe it doesn't. So hopefully you can do some of the work during work hours, but a lot of times you have to do it outside of work hours. And so it's just like another job that you have to do to do board. So if you're having your own staff have a different vision than you could go up against them if you want it, but that's going to be a whole lot of work on your part to do that. And so if it's, anyway, so that's what I kind of witnessed as an outside of the as a outside the board, because I wasn't on I was on the first board. I didn't make it. I wasn't even elected on the board. They had the board that got voted in for the first one didn't have all their seats filled, and they had a rule at the time. They may still have this rule where they can recruit, and they wanted to recruit me because I was from the South and they didn't have any Southern representation. I was like, look, I don't really understand Mississippi, okay, but I could, I understand New Orleans, sorry, but I don't understand Mississippi. I can't help you with that. But and so they pulled me on there, and I didn't make it even through a full term. So to take that as it was, I'm not very good at those kind of things. But it was.
I did want to ask you. I did want to ask you about that. So when you were on the board, what was the relationship between the board of directors and the executive? I would imagine at that point it was probably about the only staff person, but
Yeah, it was
Was it
Melissa
more of
Hoover.
the board kind of giving the direction, and
I would say that
Melissa?
was the feel that I had, is that the board definitely had. I felt like the board was involved in a lot of the decisions that were happening. Matter of fact, so when I was there, that we were seeing the first documentations for what was, it was described to me. I didn't have a name for it. What turned into Dowie. And I remember being very concerned about it, and people were like, I was like, well, I was like, this organization needs to be controlled by us, by this board, because we're actually representing the members, and that organization, could get off. And people were like scratching. I was like, well, look, we're all friends here. I'm like, I don't know if you know the history of the left at all. If we're successful at all, we're all going to be hating each other in a handful of years and fighting. And so we represent the members. We have to make sure that they're subservient to that. And I remember that, like, I was kind of shocked by a bunch of progressive lefties who were in worker co-ops that didn't have that same perspective as me, like that paranoia about how power works, But
Yeah.
So I seen the first documents that I think that was the seed of Dowie at the time. Somebody could say maybe that died off and they came up with a new plan. So maybe, but anyway, I seen that, and I was voicing my concerns about structure back then. But no, I definitely felt like I adored Melissa Hoover. I haven't talked to her in years, So I don't know what's. I see. Last time I seen her was at the. I was at a conference that was in the Southern Cooperative. Anyway, I can't remember the conference that I was at with her, but I felt like we all collaborated really well together, and I thought that we were actively trying to seek. Like all the board had taken on a certain amount of co-ops, and we'd call them and try to get the feedback about what they thought we should be doing. Everybody wanted healthcare, and we had no ability to help them with that. But but anyway,
Yeah. Unfortunately, turns out if we want good healthcare, we're going to have to get it for everybody, like literally everybody in the country.
That's probably right. Exactly.
But it's something you said made me think of something that had really stood out to me. I don't know if you read Rebecca Kimball's article that she wrote for us, Back to Basics, aligning our national organizations with co-op principles. But she had, I don't know, I think this might be from her own personal notes about, she says here, I will actually just show you this. You can see what I'm reading. Where is it? There it is.
Yeah, I did read her. I did read her article, and it was to me it was like a far more intelligent and articulated opinion than my own. That had the same basic, that I agree. Well, I'm a fan now of hers. All right, so
yeah, and so the talking about, and here I remember this as being about USFWC, but it's perhaps about Dowie. Says, I was elected to the first USFWC at the 2009 annual member meeting held in Madison, Wisconsin. During that meeting, the membership decided to raise dues by 50% to support ongoing operations and the anticipated formation of DAWN, the Democracy at Work Network, and Dowie, the Democracy at Work Institute. Some key thoughts about the role and importance of self-determination from the discussion were recorded in the notes. This is the part that stood out to me as like, what? This is not the time to hesitate on the fundamentals of institution building. That was like, when is the time to hesitate on the fundamentals of institution building, and not when you're setting them up, right? If we do not have a strong and self-sufficient federation, we won't have a strong and vibrant cooperative movement in America, yada, yada. But it was just this first sentence. And this, I feel like, to me, just talking and, hearing from a lot of people who've been around for this whole process, like, to me, that's a huge thing. Like, maybe I think this has bitten us in the butt a bit, that when the Federation and Dowie were set up, there was a rush to do it, right? It was like, it is what it seems like. I was not there, so I can't say. And when I read something like, this is not the time to hesitate on the fundamentals of institution building, like, no, this is the perfect time, you would think, right?
Exactly.
This is like the only time to do it, because when else are you going to do it? You just set it up with whatever structure you come up with that seems, all right, it's good enough for now. well,
Right.
that's never going to get changed. It just gets,
it's much
Cal-
easier to have something in the beginning. And once something has inertia, it's very hard to change it. You have to take, everything is any idea, any organization, it becomes very difficult to change. So that's the same way I felt at the time as when I was going through it. The structure of the U.S. Federation of Worker Co-ops, actually, I had some critiques about that at the time, but I felt like I was a noob, too new in there to like really like trying to put my foot down about what I thought I was seeing. I kind of assumed that the bigger co-ops that were the driving forces to creating the U.S. Federation of Worker Co-ops had a better vision about what they were doing. But I remember like just being surprised by just things that were just happening. But I didn't feel like I was. Our co-op was a handful of years old at that time, and we really felt like we were in the startup phases for the first handful of years. A bunch of us didn't even work full time. So I like coming in, like saying, "Hey, y'all are doing this wrong," and I don't even have a functioning co-op at the time. Felt a little arrogant on my part. So I just like, well, I'm here to learn. Is basically that's why we came. And then they put me on the board,
Right.
which I thought was a little silly, but I remember the first meetings that we're having. I guess they were in Madison, and there was they were facilitating like the general membership, and I remember someone was trying to make a motion to do something, and the facilitator was like, "Well, look, we don't have time for that." Or they didn't say that. What they were saying was they were trying to shut him down because it was the wrong procedure. And I was like, I know parliamentary procedure, so I made the proper motion for parliamentary procedure for them to do what they want. And the facilitator at the time turned to me and was like, "Well, we don't have time for this. We can't do this." I'm like, "Why are you talking to me? You're supposed to like go to the members and say, and you want to make your commentary on top of that's fine. That's your facilitator progress, but it's not. It shouldn't be your decision to have an agenda." I didn't even want to talk about the thing I wanted to talk about. I was just trying to back him up, and just trying to teach people how to use. But it wasn't it was apparent to me that wasn't a parliamentary procedure thing, and the facilitators felt comfortable and implementing like this, just saying what was going to happen, which I was very surprised by. But I still didn't say anything. I'm like, I assume that they know what they were doing, even though I was kind of uncomfortable with how things were unfolding. And there's like lots of examples of that, but I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, well, this is one thing that's come up in talking to people about the founding of the Federation, the early years of like and even before with the Eastern Conference for Workplace Democracy and
right.
And it's always been hard to get worker owners actually involved in this stuff. So you saying like, I showed up, we were still new worker co-op. I didn't feel like I really knew, like, I would guess that probably a number of those people who felt just fine taking being more forthright with their opinions. Also, I mean, had less actual being a worker owner experience than you did at that point.
Maybe, yeah.
Like for a fact, I know that because I know some of the people involved, and it's like, no, they weren't worker owners. They were academics. They were, maybe doing some TA stuff that wasn't really happening. They're mostly like academics and nonprofit type people. And that was actually, one of the things that Jessica's talked about with the ECWD is that when they started that conference, they didn't have enough worker owners to like fill out an organizing committee. It was mostly people who were not worker owners putting together this conference for worker owners. And they recognized that was an issue and that was a problem. So they're like, okay, we're doing this because it needs to get done, but we need to like fix this ASAP.
Exactly. There was at one of the conferences when members could still make motions on the floor to get things in there. Tim Hewitt from Arizmendi, he made a motion to try to like restrict who could be on the board to only worker owners. So like a certain portion could only be worker owners, and then it got a little controversy, and he pulled it back. And I took his motion, says I'm taking his motion, and I'm reintroducing it because I wanted that to happen. And I've asked people about that motion because I know it passed because I was there, and it doesn't appear to be in the memory of so no one recorded it. No one has.
It's not in the notes.
They've lost notes from some of these meetings. So apparently, because I've asked about that, is that still a rule? Did it get overturned? And people don't even know what I'm talking about. So yeah. I don't know what happened with that. I've been wanting to catch up with Tim Hewitt about that to find out what he remembers, because it was a number of years ago. You figure it would stick around, because he had gone to Sacopa, that's the international thing, and he said he was very surprised to find that their board was mainly made up of developers that weren't in co-ops. And so he was like, well, maybe we should try to stop that from happening here. That seems like a natural thing that would happen. These developers, this is their job, is to develop co-ops, so they're going to take an interest in there. They're going to probably have more free time to do it. So that made sense to me, and we really want it to be worker co-op led, not by developer led. And I don't know what the actual makeup now is. So yeah, exactly.
Well, I mean, I know it's in terms of the membership, you don't have to be a worker co-op to be a member. You can be a democratic workplace. You can be just an individual supporter even of worker co-ops. So, as far as being on the board, I'm fairly certain not everybody on the board is a worker owner. I could be wrong about that, but
the rule that we
over the years,
a majority had to be worker owners or something like that.
Majority,
I forget that's why I'm trying to look for what the ruling was, but I can't even find it. So I don't know exactly.
I mean, so this does seem to be an issue, and it's what came up in reading Rebecca's article and talking with Jim and John about Dawn and everything with that, and how that was like ended. My question is, what is the accountability process for in the U.S. Federation? Like, if members have problems with the management, with the staff, is there any process for doing that? Like, we all know in worker co-ops, like, before you do anything, you're supposed to have your conflict resolution processes figured out. I wonder, are there any at the U.S. Federation? Because there doesn't seem to be. I think we would know about them at this point. There have been enough people who have actually gotten elected to the board specifically to try to remedy some of these things, that I would think if there were an actual process, they would be there to use it. And if there's not, we need one, right?
Right. In theory, there would be the process would be is that they could, if you don't like what the leadership's doing, you should be able to go direct to members, right? We don't need the leaders to be in our way. And as far as that goes, I am aware of. Let me not talk to other people, but there is a process where you're supposed to be able to get things. You email the staff, and the staff is supposed to put that on to where it can be just voted by the members themselves, right? My understanding is that the staff will try to, in situations that I'm kind of familiar with, I'm going to be vague here just because I don't want to speak for knowledge that I have that they may not be willing to come forward themselves and talk about those things. I don't know where they are, but I know the staff has jumped in and tried to stop that from happening, which seems like something they should not be able to do at all. They should be like, get out of the way. Your job is to put it on the agenda. That's what your job is. You might ask for a clarifying question, or if you really want it to be helpful, you could say, maybe the wording of this is a little unclear. You want to like clean up the language, like to be helpful, but ultimately not to be a block. And there was active blocking happening in this situation that I knew, which seemed highly inappropriate. And I don't like now. That led me to why I would say what I said was that it doesn't feel like membership led, and I don't know how you reform it if that kind of stuff is going on.
Right. And this is the question, like, in a situation like this, okay, the staff has an obligation to, help with communications between members in this way. And instead of fulfilling that obligation, one or more staff people is blocking that from happening, is keeping that from happening. What is the recourse for the members? Is there any at all? And it seems like there's not right now. It seems like there is no recourse. And that to me says that, okay, well, then the organization it's run by the staff. It's the staff's organization. And they should stop calling the worker co-op federation. Maybe, I don't know, but it's a big question that, I mean, I don't think many people want to ask, certainly not in public. And yeah, and we haven't seen a good, I've never seen a good answer, because like I said, it's not like these are new issues. People have had problems with this for a long time. And we've known several board members, people who got elected to the board specifically to deal with this, and ended up either quitting or not running for, just going one term and then kind of like giving up, because they felt like even as a board member, even as the board chair, or even as like, not not really having the ability to kind of get these issues addressed. So
yeah,
I don't know, it's a question for us.
Yeah, I think, so one thing that kind of occurs to me is on a lot of nonprofits, is that you have the executive directors basically kind of managing the board, right? And that's what it feels like is happening in this situation. Is that the board is, you have a bunch of people who never ran an organization like this who are getting elected as the board, and I'm not certain what their capacity is to understand get caught up to speed, understand all the issues, and then exert their authority that they rightfully have based on the bylaws. But you're going to have to fight that. I don't know. I'd be curious what other, I haven't dug in and heard what many of the board members have done. I know a handful of them over the years. I'd be very curious what they had to say about that kind of stuff. My involvement was, I thought the board was in a much better place, and I didn't feel bad. I felt bad that I wasn't participating more, as opposed to like where I felt like I didn't have influence. I felt like we ran the organization.
Right. Yeah. I mean, according to what Rebecca wrote in her article, it's like in the last 10 years or so that it's really shifted to being more kind of staff directed.
I think there's a lot more money involved, and that's what's happening.
That's certainly got to be part of it. And I will say, while keep saying like, we've talked to other board members have these issues. The sample that I'm getting is certainly not. It's a biased sample, right? I've talked to all of the disgruntled board members. Right. A lot of the board. I don't know what all of the board members think. So, that's just something worth mentioning.
Have you guys talked to MadWorks at all?
Yes, we are in very close communication with MadWorks.
Yeah, because I know they have some grievances.
Yes. Well, I mean, this is one of the things, that Rebecca wrote about in her article. Another thing that points to me to like a lack of accountability of the staff of the Federation is that there was this due sharing agreement between regional federations or regional networks and the U.S. Federation, and that policy was revoked unilaterally by all accounts,
without board input. Board input.
With no board input, and there's like no accountability for that. In my book, if you're the director of an organization and the board has made policies and you just start tearing them out of the policy manual because you don't like them, like unilaterally, to me it's like, okay, there has to be some, like, that's not acceptable.
Well, in that situation, I think the board, that they asked for the right to negotiate dues from the board, from a board, and then implement it, and so then they were able to. So I don't know that they were violating the rules, but definitely violating the spirit. Because the board would have definitely want to have been involved in that, right? About such a big organization. But I think
there's a big change in policy. It sounded like, and again, because there is no like real public conversation about this, like it doesn't get aired out. We're all kind of forced to go on like, oh, well, I've talked to this person, this is what I heard from this person, and try to piece it together. And so, you end up, I can definitely like have a big mouth and no filter, and will, can get myself in trouble like that. But it's like, can we at least just talk about it so we can all get on the same page as to what exactly did happen and how that, because that to me is a big question. It's like, we don't actually know exactly how that decision got made. It seems like, and like with Dawn, their funding being, revoked by the Federation without having any communication with the Dawn members before doing that. How did that decision get made? I haven't talked to anybody who actually knows, who can say exactly how for sure, right? We all just can speculate. So,
Right. But my understanding was that the board at the time was assured that they would work it out with him, and it would be better than ever.
They would
I
work
really,
it out. Okay.
I really need to see if I can get some of these people to, if I can get people to get on the record with you. I don't know. I don't know if they're willing to, but
Right.
because
Well,
I'm secondhand knowledge, so I'm not the best person.
Well, I mean, Jim Johnson and John McNamara went on the record on a live stream a couple of months ago talking about Don, and they said, both of them, they were informed that Don was being canceled. It was being, as an organization, was no more, in an email that they received like a couple of days before the conference.
Right.
They weren't consulted at all beforehand. So whatever else happened, like, that's a huge problem. That's a big issue in a supposedly democratic organization. And again, there was no accountability. And to me, I was still like brand new. I didn't really know what was going on. I was new to worker co-ops at this point, or like it had just happened, or so I didn't really know. But it's like, putting myself in their situation, I would think, man, I would show up at that conference with a head full of steam and just like ready to, what the heck is going on here? Like, it certainly wouldn't. But apparently that, there was nobody who is as much of a hothead as I am to make a stick about it. And so that's what they need. It just happened.
Right. Exactly. So that's what they needed. I know that there was a conversation that happened with some of the people from MadWork and the board at this last conference, but I never found out what happened. Do you know what happened? Like, because there was a conversation about their conflict that they had, but I just know they sat down.
No, I haven't got the lowdown on that one yet.
Well, I would say this just on the thing I was saying was that so in our own co-op, we always kind of at the C4, we always kind of use the federation as a way of kind of educating new members. In New Orleans, probably a lot of places, a lot of people don't know what a co-op is, and we hire them. We don't hire if they know about a co-op. We'll just explain it to them, but we always kind of recognize it as it's kind of a form of authority if you know what the structure should be and other people don't. So one of the ways we try to figure out how to, information can be a form of authority. And so one of the ways we try to like disarm that is to send people to the conference. They can get their own definition of what a co-op is and their own ideas about what a co-op is. And then they'll meet people and they have their own visions. They come back with new ideas of things so it's always kind of neat to see that happen. And I was speculating that, and this is what I wrote in my stuff, is I don't know how useful it is to that. And I just to throw a bone to the U.S. Federation of Worker Co-ops. Our last conference, we sent one of our newest members, Jennifer, to the conference, and she had a great time. She felt like she learned a lot, and she felt more connected to the co-op movement. I had to like bite my tongue so I don't have to like give all my cynicism, when she was going. And so she got something out of it. So I guess it's still good for that. I haven't been on a couple of years. So I'm glad to hear that that's still a powerful thing to send new people to. So, and like I said, that's more the networking side. That's all it is the members coming together and the workshop can make a difference. But it's usually the members themselves that are connecting and you learn a lot from. So I think it still has its uses there. It still has its uses as an advocacy organization, for policy, which is, that's not nothing. But it feels like it could be a whole lot more,
Yeah, I do wonder on the policy stuff though, where it comes from, because it seemed like we're as members presented with the policy. They'll like ask for a sign off on some things, but it definitely I don't recall there being like any kind of committee, anything formed to like let us draft some policy that we want the feds to adopt.
Solid point.
It was here's something Obama's doing, or here's something that Rokan or whoever is pushing. Let's jump on board with it.
Right.
And I don't know how those bills.
Like I said, it could be better, right? There was when I was I remember after a handful, the first couple of years, California was changing their, or maybe it was the IRS, or maybe it was the IRS of California, but they were changing the rules about how patronage and taxation was going to go in, and the Federation got involved and was trying to help out co-ops that way, which is great. I remember at the time I was like, well, that's what they should be doing. And they also need to be working in New Orleans to get us a co-op law, because we only have one to complain about how bad it is. They get, but there's more co-ops there anyway. So yeah, so I was hoping they'd circle back around and give us a law, but
yeah. Well, so yeah, I mean, just as we're kind of getting ready to wrap up here.
Oh yeah,
I do want to say, like,
flies.
that probably been super critical of the Federation. I know I personally get to be publicly pretty critical of the Federation. It's not because I think everything is bad, but right. Because I think if we actually care about our organizations and we want them to be strong, we need to be real about their weaknesses and their failings. And if nobody wants to talk about weaknesses or failings because, that's uncomfortable or it might step on the wrong toes, our institutions that we create, that we put all this time and work into creating, are going to suffer, and we're going to suffer then for it. So even though it's uncomfortable, I think it's really necessary to have these kind of conversations.
Agreed. Sunlight's the best disinfectant, right? So things need to come to light, exactly. and we need to have a debate, and then we can disagree, and that should be how it happens, right?
Yeah. So thanks for coming on and talking.
Well, thank
to
you for
us,
doing
Jeffrey.
This. It's great.
Yeah, it's been great. Chris, do you have any closing words before we wrap it up?
Nothing inspirational.
We'll get you.
I mean, I do have a lot of ponderings, though. Like, I guess something to kind of think about, and maybe it could be a future discussion, is like how many people today are in the co-op world who are like how Jeff was when you first started, where you're like, hey, everybody here is more experienced than me, and you kind of like let others others be more involved. But is that really good? What more is needed
right.
to deal with like degeneration or hierarchies that do exist in the co-op world? That's something to think about.
Yeah, definitely.
Yep. Yeah, and I think and just final closing up, Jeffrey, the point you made about learning from leftist organizing history and knowing like what has happened before,
right.
Very important. And I do also feel like that, like I feel like this is kind of basic stuff that we've forgotten,
right.
or we're thinking, oh no, we're all friends here, which is classic worker co-op mistake, right? Like, oh, we're just a bunch of hippies and we all love each other. Like this can possibly go wrong. Like, oh,
right. Yeah, I always tell people that they're thinking about starting a co-ops is make sure you have a firing process before you start your co-op, because you're going to need it. I mean, we don't all get along all the time, So make sure you have your procedures in order, because you don't want to be coming up with those procedures when you need them. That's going to be a horrible process.
Right. For sure. Good advice as always. And so we're going to wrap it up. If you've enjoyed this conversation, you can go to geo.coop/donate and help make sure that we can continue doing these long into the future. And until next month, when we will be back again on the second Monday of the month, 7 p.m. Eastern, we will say, see you next time.
Bye, everyone.